Okay, I've always been fascinated with human sexuality, and you've stated in the past that human sexual energy is very similar to source energy, and I want to know if you can expand on that.
Everything that is physical can be an extension of source energy. But sexuality is a subject where many people, without even knowing it, do the things that are necessary in order to tune into source energy. In other words, you get single-minded about your subject. You sort of set everything else aside. You're not worrying about a whole lot of other things. You focus better, usually, not always. You focus better. And then it is more empowered when there are two of you focused. And so, as you have the experience of focusing with a singular intent, you tune in to something that allows you connection. It's such an interesting thing that through that engaging in sexuality, there is that orgasmic experience, which is the true alignment or attunement experience. And it is also interesting that it is also the perpetuation of your species, which speaks to the true creativity of the physicalness. And so Jerry, for many years, he was teaching a course called Turning Thoughts to Things. And he was using as his textbook a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. And there was a chapter in this book called Sexual Transmutation. And Jerry always skipped that chapter because it was embarrassing to him to have this conversation with an audience. He wasn't sure that he could make them understand it the way he meant to understand it. But that's what that conversation was about in that book. It's about when you have had an experience where you have allowed alignment and had a personal experience of what alignment feels like, then you can apply that to other things. And so it's the focus, it's the single-mindedness, it's the interest that really is what that is all about. Apply focus to anything without adding contradiction to it, and you're going to achieve that alignment, and you're going to have, in a relatively short period of time, an exhilarating experience that confirms that alignment that you have accomplished.
So why do we humans make such a big stink about it when we all clearly are so fascinated with it? Why is it so?
Well, we don't think that that's different from the way humans feel about most of their emotions. Most people are not utilizing emotion as any sort of guidance tool. Most people are observing and trying to get agreement with others. So many people are guarded about so many things. And we stated earlier today, this is really the answer to this important question that you've posed to us here. That when you are focused here in the physical experience and you are needing a condition to be altered so that you can have a better feeling response to that condition, you're in trouble because you can't control the conditions. And so that's why your world gets all balled up in wars and walls and bombs and trying to control behavior, because so many people really believe they want to feel good. They innately want to feel good. And when they look at that and do feel good, and look at that and do feel good, and look at that and don't feel good, we understand why their knee-jerk reaction would be, we need to control that. We need to control that so that we can feel better. But in time, you have to acknowledge that impossible control just wads you all up and keeps you from your joy. And when you discover that you have the personal resources to come into the alignment with who you really are, with your own desire and with your joy, whether anybody else is doing anything about it or not, then you have discovered what unconditional love is, what the true meaning of unconditional alignment is, you see. So most people are extremely well-meaning. They all were when they first got here. Some get further and further from it as they really believe that they need to control things for their own sake and for the sake of others. But the more they push against, because when you say no to something, law of attraction thinks you said yes to it. When you say no to something, it's like saying yes to the thing you don't want. So there's a war against drugs, and a war against poverty, and a war against teenage pregnancy, and a war against terrorism, and a war against, and a war against, and a war against, and all of those things getting bigger. Because the more of you focus and the more of you push against, then the more of those things exist in your world, but not necessarily in your world. Just because something is rampant in your civilization doesn't mean that it has to be expressing itself in your experience. It all depends upon what you are giving your attention to, you see. So it's interesting in a step 5 conversation The true route to the peaceful world that you want is through the war that you are now so much living. Because as you see that, you desire a different world. And so you launch a peaceful world, you launch a cooperative world into your vortex. And all those that are being born come with that in mind. All of us who are non-physically focused hold that. And that's why there will never be a time, it is our absolute promise to you, when what you think are the negative influences of your world will dominate. That will never be true. Because the most that could happen is that some of you, maybe even a lot of you, can pinch yourself off and disallow yourselves from receiving the well-being that's all lined up for you. But you're croaking constantly. Isn't that a wonderful thing? You're reemerging into pure positive energy. You're coming into alignment. Those like you are finding it in another way, through meditation or through just wanting to feel good. And the new ones being born all know it, and the animals all know it. So the balance of your planet is really, 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 really healthy.
That's good to know.
And poised for longevity, for eternalness, you see. But if you want to, you can join the crowd where you can focus on something that you can't control and get all wadded up about it and use it as your excuse to pinch yourself off from your own resources and then proclaim things are not going well and I am the living proof of it. And we say, you are not the living proof of things not going well. You are the living proof of someone who's using that as your excuse to pinch yourself off from the well-being that would be there otherwise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sexual orientations, where does that come from? Do we choose that before we come here?
Every time, every time, every time, every time, every time.
Interesting.
Because sometimes as teachers you say, I'm not going to be controlled by a society that is misguided in their believing that controlling is the answer. I'm going to be uncontrollable in this specific way.
So how does Source feel about bisexuality?
We want to get to the basis of the question. Let's get to the basis of the premise, not the sexuality that you think. That's not the premise. The basis of this question, the important premise of this question is, do you think that you are a puppet on a string and that you're here just to figure out what Source wants you to do? That Source has got it all figured out, that Source is finished with creation and now you're here being tested to see if you can get in. It's not like that at all. You're here exploring and evolving and discovering and deciding, and Source is supporting and flowing. So Source doesn't have a contrary opinion about what you're choosing. The contrary opinion that you feel when you choose it from Source is when you get contrary of your own desire. You're the one that's sifting and sorting and launching the rockets. You're the one that's causing the expanding. You're the leading edge out here, you see. But your mind doesn't want to go quite there, does it? Your mind wants to believe that there are rights and wrongs that you must follow, that there are things that you must do. And that's because so many have come before who needed to control your behavior. And so they said, if you really want to thrive and be part of our club, and in the early days, the economic and the religious clubs were almost the same club. If you want to be part of this club, then you must do these things, and you must not do these things. And so you said, I really want to be part of this thriving club. And so I will not do those things, and I will do these things. And then as you lived a little bit of life and you noticed, hey, wait a minute. I'm not doing those things, and I am doing these things, and I'm not so much thriving. And that person over there is doing the things that they're not supposed to do, and not doing the things that they're supposed to do, and look at them thriving. And then they said, oh, well, you can't tell by what's going on in this life. It's in the afterlife that you will discover whether you got it right or not. So now you are left, you're taking somebody else's word for it. You are completely setting aside your own guidance system with your own inner being there, guiding you, giving you impulses, helping you to find your way to the things that your life has called through you, you see. You're not puppets on a string. And so we really like it when you know. that the opinion that Source has for you is always about your thriving, always about your happiness, always about your self-discovery of your path of least resistance, and never, ever, 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 ever will be. How you put God and hate or God and vengeance in the same sentence is really a sort of screwy thing, don't you think? You can't have it both ways. What is what man calls God? Well, what we are calling that source energy is the culmination of all that you have discovered that has been of benefit to you and to mankind. In other words, there is this vibrational reality, but it's not these petty things that you use to squabble and push against one another about. You are pure positive energy. You are liquid love. You've come to uplift. You've come to be empowered. You've come to take the energy that creates worlds and flow it through. And when you are in sync with all that you are, then you feel that and you know that. And when you push against anyone, you've disconnected yourself from your source. And that's why so many hateful people need to gather together in groups, because they don't have the resource of their own alignment. So they're looking at it from others, you see. They're wanting the opinion or the consensus of others to support them in their pushing against. And we're not wanting to push against those who are pushing against. In other words, everyone's having the experience, and all are contributing, all are adding to the whole. Because when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. And the collective consciousness, this collective consciousness vortex, is a sight to behold. What you all have created is a magnificent world that it's time for you to cash your chips in on. It's time for you to line up with what you've put there. It's time for you to be the manifestors, the realizers, the actualizers, the livers of the magnificent life that you have created together. Don't try too hard to figure out why everybody else or mass consciousness is doing anything. Just take the platform of what you're observing and from it choose what you prefer. And as best as you can, give your undivided attention to your preferences and watch the empowerment that flows through you. And in time, you will find yourself really not interested in exploring those subjects that are so insignificant in nature. And what we mean by that is insignificant in that they're much more step one than they are step three. There's much more about what's wrong than there is about what's wanted. And soon your teeter-totter will tip on the fulcrum, and you will find yourself feeling impassioned with big thoughts, with big things, with big power. And the pettiness of caring about what anybody else is or isn't doing with it will just leave you. We've been saying to you, just mind your own business. Mind your own business. And your own business is the business between where you are vibrationally on a subject and what's in your vortex. That's your business. And when you start minding your own business, the empowerment comes. But even more than that, or as well as that, is the joy of being here, the joy of being able to be the interpreter of all of this creative energy. Think about it. Your Earth is spinning in perfect proximity with other planets. Do you think that's accidental, or do you think that's consciousness focused? And when you begin to focus upon the things that are important to you in this time-space reality, and we want to say to you, these questions that you are asking are important questions. We're not trying to head you off from any of these questions. These social issues, these things that matter to you, these are important questions. It's why you light it up. It's why we want to have this conversation. We just want you to line up with what's in your vortex about them more, rather than pushing against what's in mankind about them more. Stop facing reality and start going more with the flow, with what you can feel is right. And that's why some people come with an orientation that is a different sexual orientation than others, and they cannot deny it. Isn't it nice that you came with something undeniable, something that you cannot deny, even though almost everybody would like to line you up and get you to deny it in some way? Not anymore. But it wasn't long ago that most people wanted to line up and get somebody to change their mind about something that they were not ever, ever, ever going to change their mind about. Well, we want you to feel that way about everything that is important to you. Don't let the naysayers influence your vibration. Don't let those who don't know anything about what's in your vortex or who you are or about how you flow or about the process that you work or about how you feel, about who you were, about why you're here, about what extension of source energy you are. Don't let those who don't know who you are try to dictate to you how you should feel or how you should be or how you should live. You all came to live together, and you are not all the same. Have you noticed?